Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and for the fourth week in a row, Hadley is here.
It's Hadley. You can't get rid of me.
I'm surprised we haven't scared you off yet.
Nah.
So this week we are doing our final episode in our classic era multi-doctor marathon. The other episodes that we did this for were anniversary specials. There were good reasons to bring back classic doctors. This one did it, I guess, for the fun of it. It plays into a theory that I have about the early
Fun.
Sixth
I mean,
Doctor
that's
era.
a bit of a strong word.
Sure. I mean, look. I mean, Hadley, are you? I don't know how much of the Sixth Doctor era you've seen. I assume incredibly little.
I told you that the Five Doctors is the first Classic Who episode I've watched in full.
Sure, but it's possible that in between now and then and now, you might have
No.
decided
No.
She's too busy with stale bread.
if Five Doctors, you've watched Five Doctors and went, man, this is mediocre. I want more of this. I'll keep watching.
There's no version of me that's like, oh, I've got some time to kill. Yeah, I'll put on an episode of Classic Who. Why not?
We're looking at the Two Doctors today. It's from the first season of the Sixth Doctor's very short era. So I'll brief history lesson for you, Hadley. The end of the Fifth Doctor era. So basically the way it was structured was the Fifth Doctor's last season. It was like his final story, and then the first Sixth Doctor story, and then the season ended. The final episode of the Fifth Doctor's tenure is widely considered to be one of the best episodes of the show ever. And the first episode of the Sixth Doctor's run is widely considered to be the worst. There was incredible whiplash tonally and critically in a matter of weeks. And as a result, there was a huge behind-the-scenes change to how they approached the show in between seasons for the Sixth Doctor's first full run. They switched the format from the standard being 4 24-minute episodes a story up to 2 44-minute episodes a story. And I think as another thing they did, and this is just a personal theory of mine, something they tried to do to course correct and try and curry favor for the Sixth Doctor era is just throwing in as many recognizable elements from the show's past as they possibly could. One of the first stories they did this week was Attack of the Cybermen. I think this was the first story in this season. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Fitz.
No, I think, no, Attack of the Cybermen, I think, was the first.
It was? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is episode 2 of season 6.
Yeah. So that episode aired. Both me and Fitz watched it for the podcast. We both agreed it was terrible. It did not handle the Cybermen.
It was pretty fucking bad.
It handled the Cybermen incredibly poorly, and it also brought back a character from a very well-regarded Fifth Doctor story with the Daleks. It brought back a side character from that episode and completely changed his motivation on a dime.
It also had a terrible first episode that didn't go anywhere and had no point whatsoever, and the characterizations, especially of the Doctor, were needlessly unpleasant and just fucking stupid.
Well, that's another thing. One thing they decided not to do in their adjustment to try and win the favour back was alter the Doctor's character at any point, because the Sixth Doctor in The Twin Dilemma, which is his first story, has an infamous scene where he starts to strangle his companion.
Oh, God.
Why you little?
Basically, yeah. And we've seen now, this for me anyway, this is my third story that I've watched with the Sixth Doctor and Perry. In no scene that I've seen the two in have they ever come close to seeming like they like each other. It is one of the most... It's the most bizarre Doctor-companion dynamic I've ever seen, where neither of them want to be there, but they stay together regardless.
To be fair, that is like real-life relationships too.
Well, sure. But again, it is very, very strange, because, like, again, I haven't seen the Fifth Doctor's final story, but the whole reason he regenerates is to save her, specifically. It's one of those things where it's like the Doctor dies saving one person, and this is a companion he's only known for, like, 2 or 3 episodes. It's not like a Rose situation, it's not a Wilfred situation. And that's why the Fifth Doctor's departure is so strong. And then immediately the relationship pivots to, I hate you and will demean you at any feasible opportunity.
When I'm not strangling you.
Exactly, yeah. So this is a dynamic has carried across to the Two Doctors, which is the episode we're talking about today. An episode which brings back recognizable elements from the show's past and doesn't understand them. An episode which treats which has the Doctor characterized as an up himself pompous asshole, and has the Doctor companion dynamic as one of complete and utter hostility, where the two don't get along and don't share any like meaningful exchanges between each other across the course of the very rather long story. This is the only story in the Sixth Doctor era to be this long. It's a shame that we've subjected you to it for that reason. So with all that being said, Hadley, this is your second classic era story you've ever watched. What are your thoughts?
I have so much to unpack, guys.
Yep, you've
I've
mentioned
got
it.
quite a few things to talk about too. It's going to be exciting.
I don't know what I just watched. on a purely objective level, this was just god awful. There's no themes. There's no real plot. The characterization is all over the place, and I don't know. I don't get the androgyne. They feel racist to me, but I could not tell you what race they were stereotyping. They just felt racist.
Yep,
Well,
and look, there are a lot of really unpleasant undertones to the androgyne stuff that we'll touch on a bit later on. It's not stuff
we
that is,
definitely
it's not stuff
will.
that's particularly they're not going to be particularly unique opinions. I think this is stuff that people have been saying about them for a while now. They feed into something that I hate about a lot of sci-fi and and especially something as thematically rich as Doctor Who. When you start poking into like, oh, why is the Doctor saying this about the androgynes? It starts coming across as deeply unpleasant. Yeah. Look,
I'm not quite done with my thoughts.
okay, no, sorry. Go ahead.
And and then there's a caveat to that where I just cannot in good conscience tell you that this episode I hated, because it is just so weird and so bizarre. It feels like The Room to me, and I did genuinely, if you put a gun to my head, I have to tell you, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate watching it.
It's one of those things where it's like you didn't hate watching it, but it's not for the reasons that the show wanted you to like them for.
I don't know what reasons they wanted me to like it for. What is it giving me? I don't understand you. You perplex me, Two Doctors. Tell me what you want me to feel.
I don't think I've heard this comparison made before.
It's gonna be interesting.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like subjectively, there's a lot to get from watching The Room, but none of it is for the reasons that Tommy Wiseau wants you to watch it for. So that by those standards, it is a failure.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you.
Well,
can't.
Tommy Wiseau will insist that it's like a black comedy. He's full of shit, of course.
Oh, of course he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank God you two wrote many notes for this and have a lot to say about it. I don't. This episode to me was sort of like a patch of fog, where it's like nothing particularly left an impression except for the bad stuff, which leapt out at me instantly. The stuff that I have to say about it, it's a lot of stuff about it that is incredibly present. When you watch it, it's just all there. I don't have much to say. I think my contribution to this episode is mostly just going to be parroting back what you two say. Maybe chiming in a little bit more when something comes to mind. But thank God, because this is one of the most boring episodes beyond anything. Even it's one of the most boring episodes of Doctor Who I've seen. I'm someone who, if I'm watching something alone, it's very difficult for me to derive ironic enjoyment from a piece of media. I can't watch the one time I watched The Room, it was by myself, and it was one of the most miserable viewing experiences of my life. I need there to be other people in the room to get enjoyment out of something terrible.
You completely missed the pun. I need to be in the room to enjoy
Yeah, there you go. I did miss the pun, yeah. So,
fuck's sake.
By that metric, I was incredibly bored by a lot of this story. The Second Doctor is one of my favourite classic Doctors. I don't know, he had no reason to be in this beyond being a multi-Doctor episode. You take him and Jamie out of the episode, you cut 40 minutes easily, and you get it under the threshold of a standard Doctor Who episode, which would have been better, because then it would be over significantly quicker than it was.
Unfortunately, I would like it a lot less, because Patrick Troughton's impression of an androgyne is one of the funniest things I've seen on this show.
Fuck.
Look, that man is an angel, and he gives his all to any Doctor Who episode that he's in.
He does. He really tries.
And it's a shame that he's back for this. I mean, it's not a shame, because otherwise, I'm happy they gave him one more shot at the role before he died. a few years after this. But yeah, I wish it was a better script. Fitz, why don't you give your initial thoughts before we go to the timescales?
Yeah, so the two Doctors, written by Chris Chibnall, and yeah, it's basically exactly what.
That's the best thing you've ever said.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's basically everything you'd expect from your typical Chibsy script. You've got a plot that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Maybe a couple moments that are kind of interesting, but most of it is meandering nonsense. Really awful, stupid, and really unpleasant characterizations of the Doctor, because when you don't have the Sixth Doctor being a straight-up fucking cold-blooded murderer, you've got the Second Doctor being a bigot. So that's a whole thing.
And that's something I associate with the cosmic hobo of the Second Doctor. Bigotry.
Yeah. Look, in all seriousness, I say Chris Chibnall because I honestly feel like this is the sort of dumb, unpleasant, and fairly egregious shit that you would, for the most part, almost only get in a Chibnall-era script. That's why I said that. And
yeah, and I 100% agree. Like, last week I made the comparison to Matt Smith with David Tennant, and that was something you hadn't really made the connection. I hadn't made the Chibnall connection with this, but I could 100% see a story like this fitting into his era. We have like the strange moral stuff that the Doctor spouts, and you know, I don't this episode it's not as overt with that stuff as, you know, when Chibnall takes the chameleon circuit away from the Master of Color and says, "Now the Nazis will see you for who you really are." There's nothing like that there, but like it's close.
It's still bad, and and also the meandering plot and trying to. It's weird, but like I feel like this plot it's trying to cram in too many ideas, but then there's also long bits where there's not a lot happening. It's really bizarre. So in all seriousness, stories written by Robert Holmes, and
this was depressing to hear before we started recording.
Yeah, I said that to you, Cuff, before we started recording, and you were very deflated by that because Robert Holmes also wrote Carnival of Monsters, which was a personal favourite of yours.
Yep, we haven't uploaded that one yet, Hadley, but Carnival of Monsters is genuinely... I think it's my favourite classic era story that we've looked at.
It's pretty damn good.
It's fantastic.
It's... And I'm just looking...
Did he die, or are you guys just depressed because the episode sucked?
I'm upset because the same writer who wrote this wrote my favourite episode of Classic Who, and it's just a shame to see talented writers
to see it all go downhill.
Out this drivel.
Yeah, he had a pretty long career. His first story was The Crotons, and then his last one was the first episode of The Ultimate Foe, which was in The Trial of a Time Lord, which was the following season. So that's like, what, 20, 21 years?
It's long, yeah.
Yeah, writing for the show.
His mind went later in life, clearly, which is a shame.
Sorry?
It's clear that his keen wit and intelligence went later in his life.
Honestly...
Feels like an Antragum wrote this.
It looks like exactly kind of what it is, which is a story written by a man who worked for a long time on the show and thought to himself, I know these characters so well, I can basically do whatever the fuck I want with them. Yeah. And he got, you know, sort of... He lost some of his talent, lost some of his writing edge, and so he's just chucking in all this shit, seeing what sticks, and barely any of it is working. There's quite a lot of things to go through, which we'll obviously get into, but broadly speaking, because I've watched this story, I think 3 times in the last week and a half. First time wasn't too bad. I watched it and I'm like, yeah, this is bad, but is it as bad as everyone says? And there is a reason for that. It's because the big things I think that this story gets criticized for, one being the really nasty, unpleasant, and pretty bad characterizations of both Doctors, and the meandering plot. I knew about them already before going into it. I knew... Sure. I can't remember whether it was JXI or Davis who said this, but... I think one of them said that the whole bit of, you know, the Second Doctor being a bigot, they highlighted that.
Yeah, and that was Jay.
Oh yeah, right, okay, that makes sense. And yeah, so like I knew that was coming, and it was still just as disappointing as I thought it would be, but it wasn't as viscerally shocking as if I didn't know. You know, if I did, if I didn't know about that detail, that probably would have been a bit of a shell shock for me, but I already knew about that going in. And the bit where the Doctor kills Shockeye, I also knew about that, so unpleasant though it was, I saw it coming. And the plot itself, I thought, oh, there's kind of okay bits. Yeah, the plot kind of meanders a bit, especially when they're running around Spain for whatever reason, but, you know, it is what it is. Then I watched it again.
There is a genuine amount of intrigue there, where the Sixth Doctor comes in, and, like, we've just seen the Second Doctor, like, exploring the ship. It's all lively, it's all lit up, and then the Sixth Doctor comes in. It's dark, the TARDIS isn't there anymore, it's completely abandoned. Like, what the hell has happened here?
That was pretty interesting in itself.
Decent amount of intrigue at the back half of the first episode, which doesn't
And
last.
then a lot of that gets abandoned, which is kind of odd, but... But, yeah, so yes, but then the second time watching it, I thought, oh, actually, this is pretty not great. And there's little details in the characterization that I didn't notice or pick up on as much the first time, and I'll get to what those are. But
Sorry, before you continue, Fitz, I just
go
gotta
ahead.
put this out there, because there's something, I just had an idea of what this episode could have been based on Hadley's comment, and I'm really annoyed because there was so much potential. What if that was the whole fucking episode? What if it were, like, cutting back and forth between past and present, where it's, like, the Sixth Doctor exploring the wreckage of one of his past selves, like, battles, and having to piece together where they are and what happened to them? Like, that would have been incredible, but instead, like, we pivot to Spain for the last 90 minutes of the story, and it's just like, why do we do that then?
And you know
It
what?
reminds me of that Matt Smith episode where they're trapped in the TARDIS. It turns out the monsters that's chasing them is, like, the crew that got burned up by the reactor.
Yeah.
Man.
That's cool.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, Cuff, you say about this idea of it cutting between, you know, the two doctors and what they're doing, and having one doctor trying to piece together the mystery. But Robert Holmes proved that he could do that with Carnival of Monsters, because that's essentially what a lot of that story is.
100%,
so it's kind of a shame to see it get completely squandered. The whole element of, you know, maybe a part of me has died and we're in some weird time embolism, that gets completely scrapped, which is really annoying. But anyway, we'll get into it. But basically, by the time I got to the third viewing of this story, I want to say I didn't find it boring, but honest to God, I was looking at my, you know, Facebook and email, like, it felt like every 90 seconds. That's how sort of pointless and dull a lot of it was. So, again, I want to say it wasn't boring, but that's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
And by that point, I'd noticed even more details with some of the unpleasant qualities. Even the more sort of sentimental moments seemed really cheap and dumb to me. I also, actually, I found that these side characters, including the villains, were way more interesting than the main cast. That's a whole other thing, but...
Yeah.
Basically, this is... I mean...
I
it was slightly better than the worst it could have been.
Sure, I weep for the episode it could have been that focused on up-and-coming British actor and Spanish sidekick. I really enjoy those characters.
Yeah, they were good.
I fucking love the waiter, just because, like, these two very bizarre men with orange bushy eyebrows are trying to order human beings. It's just like, sorry, sir, we don't have those here.
Yes,
you'll have to go to the shop down the street.
What is it? The nouvelle what is it? The nouvelle appetite has not yet penetrated this restaurant, sir.
It's just so perfect. The writing's so... I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's so
Well, let's jump to timescales, because I think you'll be surprised at what I say about this. 158 votes were tallied. This episode has an average rating of 7.
No!
Yes!
Are you kidding me?
7!
Fuck off!
And you'll be curious to learn that 10 people gave this a perfect score. There are no 2s or 1s.
10? 10 people?
10 people said, you know what? No flaws. This is a perfect story.
Oh, Jesus.
Just another indication as to where the show was when this episode was penned. So, in terms of among Sixth Doctor stories, it's the fifth highest rated. Among Second Doctor stories, it's like it doesn't even crack. Yeah, it's like bottom 8.
Well,
That should give you some idea as to where the creative team were when in between these different eras. Because it is a thing where it's like people who generally watch this episode go, "Oh wow, the Second Doctor! Wow, he's a bigot and he's like doing this weird stuff. This is really out of character for the Second Doctor." Now, the Sixth Doctor killing people and being mean, that's perfectly in character. That's exactly what this guy's been doing this entire time.
It reminds me of the Simpson Family Guy crossover of all things.
Ooh.
Well, like, this crossover is very clearly written by the Family Guy writers, and the Simpsons team had no creative involvement.
Yeah, it's a good point.
It's a very good analogy.
It's very much... It's taking... I mean... I suppose some of the optimism of the 60s and just polluting it with this nasty 80s cynicism, which Cuff and I have already gone into because we looked at Attack of the Cybermen, which, I mean, I'm not sure if it's worse in that sense in this story, but the point is both of those elements are very much present, and because of that, the Sixth Doctor's behaviour is, not a shock, but still disappointing. But the Second Doctor, you're like, man, did something happen in the dematerialization process? Did the guy get his brain scrambled a little bit, or what was the point? And by the way, it almost seems kind of clear that they didn't even want the Second Doctor in this story that much, because in the second half of the first episode, he's just not there at all, and it's not until the second episode that we find out what happens to him, which is strange. And we also, by the way, thought that he died in part of that first story, and then
it does a decent enough job of the intrigue, but I don't think it does enough. Like, because I think they should have peppered him in a bit more if they were going to do that. But yeah,
and then they just turned him into an androgyne in the last episode for some reason. So it feels like they weren't interested in doing anything with the Second Doctor, and he's not written like the Second Doctor that much. So what the fuck is going on here?
I mean, it's fascinating, like, because there's the moment when, like, after the Doctor's been turned into an androgyne, it's like, the Sixth Doctor's like, this could have repercussions on my entire timeline. I'm going to become an androgyne if this isn't fixed. And then there's the exchange where he starts talking about, like, how delicious cats are. And it genuinely took me a minute to... It genuinely took me a minute to go, oh, hang on, this is meant to be... Is this meant to be, like, out of character for the Sixth Doctor? Because, like, it's genuinely bizarre and mean enough to make me go, yeah, this tracks.
Just last week he ate a hamster. What do you care?
Jesus.
The episode has a 6.3 for plot, which no.
Yeah, no.
It's a 2-hour plus story that could easily be told in half the time.
Yeah. I think... I mean, you'd be surprised how high I would score the plot, but it's definitely not a 6.3. No. God, no.
It does kind of feel fitting that, like, the androgyne are, like, this overindulgent, gluttonous species, and the writing is overindulgent and bloated and very long.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. 7.5 for acting. It's fine, I guess. No one's.
I think they're all right.
It's all Troughton, baby. It all goes to Troughton.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's certainly, like, at the very least, like, he and Fraser Hines, who played Jamie, like, they feel, with one or two, like, exceptions, like, in moments, they feel like they're picking up right where they left off. They haven't, like, their dynamics. The dynamic between the two is almost the same. There are a couple moments where the Second Doctor is a bit snippy at Jamie, like, more so than he normally would be, but like, otherwise they pick up their roles from the 70s, like, basically exactly where they were all those years ago. Side characters,
I really like it
fine.
starts in black and white as well.
Yeah, it was a neat touch where it starts out like a standard Second Doctor story, and then as soon as it goes colour, you're like, oh, this guy's aged. His hair's not fully black anymore.
I found this weird thing with Patrick Troughton where he, even though, you know, his era was 20 years before this, apart from the hair, for me he looks remarkably similar to when he did back in the 60s. I'm not sure what that's about, but
it's
anyway.
fine with, like, the long shots, but if it has a close up of his face, I could absolutely tell this man is out the door. He's about to have his regeneration.
Maybe. I mean, we don't know where in the Second Doctor's timeline this takes place. They leave it deliberately ambiguous.
Well, we'll get. Yeah, there's some contradictions. I think both canon and the plot, which we'll get to. But
Oh dear.
yeah.
I'm checking out of that discussion.
Yeah, me too. I don't know much about the Second Doctor era. I've seen maybe 3 stories of it.
Anyway, it's. I look, the performances I think are fine enough. There's nothing in them that makes me think, ooh, what's going on there. A little bit over the top, particularly the Sontarans and Cassini, but as I've often said with Doctor Who, it works with the style they're going for, and they do, given how poorly a lot of these characters are written, they perform them well enough where it doesn't super bother me. And like I said, I find the villains, I find Cassini and Shocker more interesting than the other characters, so at least, even if they are being a bit over the top with their performances, it all still fits together cohesively enough. I think, honestly, the performances are honestly probably one of the stronger parts of this story, but that's not saying much.
Sure. 7 for effects. I don't remember any massive, special effects sequences that happen. The Sontaran mask is pitiful. It's not great.
I mean, yeah.
They really couldn't have thought of a better design for the Androgam,
that's...
and eyebrows.
That's true as well. They could have done a bit more for that. Although I suppose, if you're going to turn the Doctor into an Androgam, you kind of want the Doctor to still visibly be the Doctor.
Yeah, we don't want another Meglos situation or something. Yeah, I mean,
there's the Doctor into an Androgam in the first place if you want interesting alien designs and...
Yeah, there's nothing, terribly huge in terms of special effects that they're using here. I mean, the Sontaran ships look a little fake, but it's nothing serious, I suppose. From the looks of it, they're using very, very, fairly early primitive CGI, but it doesn't ruin anything, and the practical effects are alright. The really weird bit where the Doctor basically just sticks needles in Jamie's neck, that made me almost wince every single time I watched it. I'm like, of all the things you're going to use to help Jamie, why are you using those? And the bit where he pulls them off his neck, it just makes me squirm a little bit, I'm not going to lie. I mean, to be fair, the practical effects there are done decently enough. I was pretty convinced that he'd stuck things in his neck, but I'm like, what was the point of that, folks?
6.7 for replay value. I think, Fitz, you're living proof that is not the case.
No, this, it got quite a bit worse, considerably worse, actually, on the second watch, and it got even more worse on the third watch, and honestly, it's probably going to get even more frustrating discussing it. So, yeah, I don't think it's got a lot of great replay value.
And the intrigue is worse now that nothing comes about it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Completely throwing away the most potentially compelling elements simply because, I don't know, fuck it. The producers said we've got, a week in Spain where we can film, so go and do that. 13
out of 79 people say this requires a previous story. I think it does, in the sense that it might sour your impression of the Second Doctor if this was your first story with him in it.
I mean, look, there are some elements in his characterization which are slightly truer to how he's characterized in the 60s than you may give it credit for. For instance, he does tend to bully Jamie quite a lot. There are a couple of decisions he made that were kind of shitty. I know that, I think, I've mentioned it before, but I think Davis mentioned that in, I think it's the Dominators, he basically, pulls a Harriet Jones and destroys a fleeing spaceship, so you could argue maybe that's slightly consistent, but it's certainly not, it's never as intense as it is here. He's never this objectively shitty.
I think it comes out more because of how the Sixth Doctor has consistently been characterized. They have an opportunity to go, maybe this is a story where the Sixth Doctor learns from his past self that, this behavior ain't good. But
he doesn't.
They pull the Second Doctor down to his level.
Yeah, which is disturbing.
I'll read out the synopsis and then we'll thoroughly give this thing the autopsy that it doesn't deserve. The Second Doctor and Jamie are sent by the Time Lords to Space Station Chimera in order to put a stop to unauthorized time travel experiments being carried out there under the auspices of the head of projects, Dastari. Dastari has been biologically augmenting androgyms, a race of voracious gourmands, including the Chatelaine Chesini, who has secretly allied herself with Group Marshal Stike of the 9th Sontaran Battle Group for no reason whatsoever. The Sontarans raid the station, killing almost all aboard. They capture the Second Doctor and take him to Earth, imprisoning him in a hacienda, I think that word is, near the Spanish city of Seville. There, Dastari, also in league with the Sontarans, plans to dissect him in order to find the Rassilon imprimatur, the symbiotic nuclei within a Time Lord's genes that are the key to time travel. The Sixth Doctor and Perry rescue Jamie from the station and then follow the trail to Spain. The Second Doctor is imprinted by Dastari with genes taken from Shockeye, the space station's androgym chef, but the Sixth Doctor rescues him and kills Shockeye. Chesini destroys the Sontarans and, reverting to base instincts, kills Dastari. She herself then dies through molecular disintegration when she attempts to time travel without the imprimatur.
It's incredible how the Sixth Doctor is just barely in that synopsis.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's true with a lot of these. Like, the synopsis often, like, especially for Classic Who, they result to, like, here's all the backstory of the aliens and, like, the unique stuff about the episode, and then here's what the Doctor did very, very quickly. Like, boom. There's very few, like, episodes of Classic Who that really revolve around, like, the Doctor's, like, personal, like, story arc or anything like that.
Yeah, like, the Second Doctor feels more like a damsel in distress in this plot than anything.
100%, yeah.
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 So, I'll ask very, very quickly. The Rassilon imprimatur. We can agree that's a bunch of bullshit, right? Like,
oh, it's all bullshit.
well, this idea that the Time Lords have this, like, genetic, like, key to time travel itself. Like, we know that they unlock the secrets of time travel at some point, but the idea that they're, like, there's something in their genes that, like, a time machine can't work without. Like, we now know with, like, the revived series has introduced things like vortex manipulators, which anyone can use to time travel. I would also, like, argue, I don't think, I would suggest that perhaps this is the only time in the entire show in which the Rassilon imprimatur is, like, a established thing. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Fitz, but I don't know if that's...
Yeah, no, I don't think it had ever been established beforehand. And I think
Cool.
I don't know, like, I assume it's that the Time Lords have, like, a genetic link to their TARDISes specifically. But it is still a bit weird. I mean,
Yeah.
it must be said.
Well, given that we've also seen non-Time Lords operate TARDISes as well.
Yeah,
It
it
continues to fall apart, and we now see it for what it is, a lazy plot device to bring two Doctors together.
Yeah.
Well, not even bring two Doctors together. You can have this story element with our Doctor. You don't need two.
No.
As is the case with a lot of these multi-Doctor specials I'm noticing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the three Doctors is really the only one of Classic Who so far that, like, feels necessary to bring multiple Doctors together. 5 Doctors didn't. 2 Doctors definitely doesn't.
Yeah.
See, there's a thing that I just didn't understand when, like, the Second Doctor becomes an androgym. Surely the regeneration stops. And, like, I was willing to give it a pass, because it's just, like, a silly plot. Then they actually made it important, because they made it that the Sixth Doctor was slowly becoming an androgym too. It's like, how does that work?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, if he becomes... Well, did they say, like... They say that, like, they spliced him with androgym DNA, and they said that, like, after a certain amount of time, those genes would become dominant.
Yeah, after an hour. Actually...
Yeah, after an hour. Would that, like, overwrite their ability to regenerate?
You'd think so.
Well, even if it didn't, it certainly would have set the Doctor on, like, a very different path. Like, he wouldn't have ended up in the situations that he regenerated in if he become part androgym, certainly.
The only context they can give to that is that earlier on the Doctor talks about the time embolism, and Perry asks, time basically, and reality being destroyed, how long would that take? And think he said a couple of thousand centuries, and she sort of waved it off. So maybe they're trying to establish that if there are changes in the time-space continuum, it would still take a fair bit of time for it to catch up. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but at least they're trying to trying to make it come together.
mean, that's
Also,
also-
The
That's
Sixth
also-
Doctor just wanted to eat a cat for no
That's
reason.
true,
Is what you're saying.
But that's also consistent with stuff with other things we've seen in Doctor Who before, where it's like someone will alter the past and then go, okay, it hasn't solidified yet. We have time to fix this.
yeah. So maybe that's what they're saying. Like, you know, the universe getting destroyed, that's such a big thing. It takes quite a while to happen, but the androgram change, that takes a short amount of time, but it's still enough time for the Doctor to sort it out. I feel like maybe one of you can correct me here. I'm actually kind of blanking as to what exactly was the reason why the Doctor turned back into the Doctor again. Was it just because...
Molecular degeneration. Like, they didn't stabilize his
Yeah,
cells.
like-
Right,
He eventually
okay.
turned back.
Yeah,
they said,
okay, that
they said they needed an hour, and then they could stabilize his cells. It wasn't
Okay,
like-
yep, no, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
it wasn't it wasn't strictly okay, and that's an hour, and then he's done. It wasn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, because they said, you know, yeah, in an hour he would basically turn into an androgram, but yeah, no, that makes sense if they hadn't completed the process.
Yeah.
Um,
We're on the andrograms. We might as well nip this issue in the bud.
Oh, God.
So, very early in the story, the Doctor's having a conversation with Dastari, who, incidentally, the entire episode gives me Stanley Tucci and Hunger Games vibes. Just purely on appearance, it's nothing more. But they're talking about the andrograms, and it's the first time we're learning about this new species, introducing them to Doctor Who, and they're portrayed as brutish, gluttonous, and generally dim-witted. But through genetic augmentations, this Dastari character has made one of them, Cassini, a higher being. She is calm. She's intelligent. She's not a glutton. And the Doctor's exact words in response to this are, "She's still an androgram. You can't change
nature." Yeah, I wrote that down too.
Yep. And look, on a surface level, it's still bad because it's playing into a sci-fi trope I hate, which is this entire species is evil and has no free will of their own accord, just like outside of their genetics. You can get away with it with some species. It works for the Daleks. It works for the Cybermen.
And even the Sontarans to an extent.
It works for the Sontarans. Well, they're clone bred, so that makes sense. But whenever it's normally villain of the week stuff where this sort of comes up, where it's an entire species that's the villain, and it's not just like a part of the species. And it always makes a new threat less interesting because it's just so boring and lazy that you've just gone, oh, the entire species is evil. But in this case, the entire species is also obsessed with food and has red eyebrows. But then there's the extra layer where it's like, well, also you need to genetically augment them in order to give them the free will to see above it. But then the Doctor's rhetoric about not being able to change nature. It is really, really close to a lot of things that people say nowadays when they're being incredibly bigoted and close-minded. Normally with issues regarding transphobia and racism and all that kind of stuff. Especially with transphobia, actually, because you see a lot of, right-wing idiots going, well, you're born with a dick, so that's who you are. You can't change nature. And no, there's very basic science that doesn't support that. It's very clear that, sexuality and gender is a spectrum. But this kind of language from the Doctor is really icky. Especially, hang on, this is the worst part, especially because the episode proves him right. Cassini remains evil, purely because of the fact that she was born that way, and there's no moment where she even fights her own, basic genetic predisposition. The episode is treating the Doctor's words as factual.
Yeah, it's uncritical, and it's really bad.
Unsurprisingly, almost 40 years later, it has not aged well.
No. It's pretty fucking bad. I mean...
In defense of the writing, I don't think they intended it that way.
No, but
it's the kind of thing where it's like, especially with the transphobia side of things, like that in the 80s, that issue was not nearly as discussed or as like there wasn't as much knowledge about it as there is today. If this kind of dialogue was written into a modern story, I could see it being discredited, and more people would be talking about it if it happened today. Let's put it that way. It's still bad that it's in this story from the 80s, but I don't think it was a deliberate targeted attack.
yeah. I mean,
I suppose I should chip in as the token transgendered on
well, please,
podcast.
yes. And this was a complete accident, incidentally. We didn't.
Yeah. You haven't brought me on as like a human shield or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Look, I don't know if I like that comparison, honestly, because
There.
the issue is that the androgam, I just don't fundamentally understand what these writers are trying to do with this race of people.
Yeah.
To make the connection between, I suppose, like humans and time and androgams and men and women, I just disagree.
Fair.
Because like the point of the androgam, I guess, is like their nature and like their very psychology are unified. They are one and the same. To change their physiology is to change how they think, which is just not how transitioning works.
Sure, that's
like
fair.
For trans people, regardless of whether you transition, you're still trans.
Yeah.
You're the same person you are from when you start taking AHT versus when you're, I guess, like at the far enough along that there's probably going to be no more changes. It's just because it's all it is like it's changing your secondary sex characteristics, and maybe you'll get sex reassignment surgery, but it's just not the same thing as like, I'm going to make you a different race now, and you're also going to want to eat people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't like that comparison, and I know I won't bring it up too much, but like in a previous episode, this comparison to the trans experience was brought up before. I would say be careful.
Sure.
Because I can see the well intentions of it, where like, yes, what the doctor is saying is kind of icky, but the grand issue is I just don't know what this episode is trying to say, so I can't come to a conclusion on whether or not it's problematic, because it's just too confusing.
Sure, I guess it is just like the similar dialogue the Doctor has that has often been used by right-wing idiots. And
I'll agree with that for sure.
That's where the episode is like at its most murky, because again, like if the episode had gone out of its way to prove the Doctor wrong, like because it's not necessarily it also just factors into the thing I hate about sci-fi, where the entire species is considered evil, because it's easier to do it that way, and then you can kill them and there's no consequences because they're genetically predisposed to be evil, and it's not a choice they've made. And they can't, and there's no room to let them, change and improve as people. They're just always going to be like that, so it's safe to kill them, and we can just be lazy about it. And that factoring in with the dialogue the Doctor has, which doesn't age well, does make it very, murky surrounding the whole thing. But I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, it... even there's that bit where Dastari and the Doctor are arguing, and Dastari's like, really, Doctor, I expected something more progressive from you. And I'm like, why is the villain saying that? And
this feels more like an analogy for transracialism, and if it was, this might just be like a subversive masterpiece. Because translationalism is a bunch of bullshit.
Okay.
And it would fit more in line, because there is a similar dialogue with race realism and the fundamental nature of androgams being unchangeable. Where I don't think many people would be like, women are fundamentally this and men are fundamentally that. They want these things and that things. A lot of them would say that, but they wouldn't ever be so hardened about it as they would with I guess we bring it up, but racism is the idea that you are a certain race, so you are predisposed to these sorts of things that feels more similar to the Androgon plot than
that's what I thought
yeah,
too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, either way,
Either
it's
way,
not good.
The whole thing is just really, really uncomfortable seeing the Doctor speak like this, and the fact that it's never even addressed really, like at all. Or if it is, it barely is, and certainly not enough for it to matter. I wrote this funny...
But also coming from the second Doctor, it's a little harder to
yeah,
because again...
you could almost expect it of the sixth Doctor, but... I mean, well, one, that wouldn't make it any better, but seeing the second Doctor say it... Man, like you said, Cuff, God forbid this is your first second Doctor story, because Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but I do like it's that spectrum, right? Where it's like, the second Doctor would never say this. Now, the sixth Doctor and the 13th Doctor, we can have that discussion.
I mean, yeah, it's just kind of fucked up.
Yeah. But it also just plays into the fact that the Andriums just aren't interesting as a villain.
They are deeply entertaining, though.
Well, there's that. I mean, especially when you give Patrick Troughton big orange eyebrows and then and just give him the direction "you're hungry" and just let him run with it.
Yeah.
It does make me wonder.
It just feels like I can't describe it, but like him taking Shockeye to Spain, it just I don't know. It's so strange. It's like taking your best friend to your favorite restaurant that they've never been to.
Well,
just like, look at all this food.
It does make me wonder when the Doctor goes back to being pure Time Lord. Do the Andriums just digest food incredibly quickly?
Yeah, they must have a really fast metabolism.
Otherwise, the Doctor, when he becomes full Andrium again, if the food is still in there, will just be incredibly bloated for a week.
And, I mean, granted, I'm not a biologist, but, like, wouldn't that be, I don't know, like a scientific inaccuracy in the fact that how could an androgram survive for very long if their metabolism is so quick when they need to constantly be eating to...
I guess the episode is just, like, removing all the scenes of them constantly going to the bathroom to shit. Or even if they're, I don't know if they're probably not even that polite. They probably just shit where they stand, like like a pre-1600s Hogwarts student.
I was trying to find a way to segue into that. You did it perfectly.
But the Andriums are only like part of the threat in this story. We also have the Sontarans, as I said before, for absolutely no reason.
Sorry, before we go, there's on this. There's one more bit I want to talk about with the andrograms here.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I've written it down as a note. But the whole thing with the Doctor turning into an androgram, it's silly, it's pointless, it doesn't really do anything with the plot. But I think there was a missed opportunity here where they could have had, I don't know, maybe the Doctor be confronted by, about their bigoted views. When they sit down with Shockeye, and I wrote here, it could be more like My Dinner with Andre, My Dinner with Andre gum,
My Dinner with Shockeye.
Yeah,
my
it's
dinner.
Just like, oh, this guy's like actually a genuinely real person. He's like, I went to India. I learned about theatre.
Yeah, it should have been My Dinner with Andre gum. So
that's very good.
So, again...
Yeah, like, it's interesting that, like, the second Doctor for the first, like, 75% of the story, all he does is spout anti-androgram, rhetoric. But then becoming an androgram doesn't seem to have, like, any impact on, like, his view at all.
Yeah, at all.
At which point you're like, well, what's the point? Like, it's not even, like, it's not even a misguided case of how the other half live. Like, it's just... It's just
pointless.
It's just pointless, as are the Sontarans.
Yep, they're fucking pointless. I remember,
Why are they here? Is it just to get the crew of the scientific research facility dead? Shishini could have just done that.
Yeah, they could. She could have done it in some way. I mean, if she's such a mega genius, surely she could have, I don't know, rigged some sort of explosive device or hacked into the security system, or she's literally called a mega genius by Dastari. It really shouldn't be that far-fetched.
But also, and I also hinted at this before we started, and I don't think you were in the room for this, Hadley, but the main Sontaran that we see in this story is about a foot taller than basically everyone else in the room. did they just forget the whole point of the Sontarans being a clone race and being incredibly short?
Yes.
Oh.
Did they just forget about that?
Yeah, that's inevitably what happened.
Certainly it is. Otherwise, they wouldn't have cast the tallest Sontaran in the world.
No, I mean, yeah,
Imperfect clones.
it's
He's part of the Bad Batch.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I would like to see a short story about the rejected Sontarans who didn't get killed on sight for some reason.
Yep, the Bad Batch.
oh god.
Oh,
So the
Christ.
Sontarans are basically pointless here. I mean,
Yeah.
they're there for spectacle. They're there to slap the second Doctor in the face, which that was kind of odd and unpleasant. Then one of them crawls out, stumbles out of a room covered in acid, which was, I mean,
That guy took forever to die as well. I think we see him 2 or 3 different times stumbling around with acid on him.
and it just kind of speaks to the kind of the nasty impulses of this era of Doctor Who, where, as I've said before, I'm fine with dark stuff. I like the edgiest side of art, I suppose, but at least try to put a point to it.
Yeah.
It was just a quick way to get rid of an element of plot that probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. Also, weird thing, when the weird little chloronic acid bombs go off, they don't spray any kind of liquid or mist. It's literally just sparks, and I could just believe that that's how it works, but even by Doctor Who effects standards, that's still pretty fucking unbelievable. I'm not gonna lie. They clearly didn't think that through very well.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, what else can you say about the Sontarans? They're fucking pointless.
They don't do anything. Is this the last time they appear in Classic Who?
Yep.
Oh, that's a shame.
Oh god. It feels very slapsticky, the Sontaran plot.
Yeah,
A little bit.
A lot of times they can sort of come across that way. I know that in the revival, the Sontarans are often played for laughs, mainly in the Moffat era with that one Sontaran character whose name I can't remember right now. Drax, maybe?
Are you thinking of Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yes, I am, but that might also legitimately be his name.
Mm.
I can't remember. I'm looking it up because this is bugging me.
Yeah.
Something to do apart from talking about the two Doctors.
Sure, I mean, you guys carry on.
Yeah.
I really don't like Perry. Especially the outfit they've given her is just gross to me.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's not uncharacteristic of what they would often dress her up with. Strax is the name of the Sontaran. So
I thought his name was Strax, actually. Anyway.
I love Jamie's just wearing a kilt because he's Scottish.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah.
very symptomatic of what he would wear for the majority of his time on the show.
Also, in sort of going with this, the second Doctor is a sort of bigoted little shitheel motif. There's a one bit where he says to Jamie, it's like, "I'll ask you not to speak in that mongrel dialect," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, Jesus, what? Jesus Christ." That's, I mean, look, as I said, the second Doctor bullying Jamie, that's nothing new, but to go that far, especially in this story when he says all this other shitty stuff, it's like, is this really what you doing, Robert Holmes? Is this the hill you're fucking dying on?
It's normally a lot more kind-hearted ribbing with the Doctor and Jamie, isn't it? It's never abject, you're filth.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's little subtle things. It's there's a line, I think a fairly famous line, I can't remember what episode it's in, but it's when Jamie comes up with this idea, and I think they're with Victoria, and the second Doctor's like, I think actually, Victoria, discretion is the better part of valor. Jamie has an idea, come along. So, he is a bit of a jerk to Jamie, but not to this extent.
Well, it's kind of a similar way that, Mickey would get treated, or Rory would get treated, right? It's never, maybe not to those extents.
Super vicious.
Yeah, because, especially early on, the Doctor despised Mickey and didn't treat him right. But, in the sort of the back half of Mickey's time, where they would sort of, he would be the butt of the joke, but it would always be you know...
Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting my mistake once again.
It's okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up Perry here, because, it's another... It's another example of, there being so many characters in the story. Perry doesn't really have a lot to do.
Yeah.
and again, the way that she's treated by the show and by the Doctor isn't great, and I think that's part of the reason why it's not a good episode for her.
Yeah.
I love that Shockeye very gently slaps her on the head and she's just out.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Well, they are meant to be. If they do set up that Andrews are meant to be like intensely strong, so if he had gone any harder, he would have caved her face in.
I see. Does that also explain when Shocker gets shot by a laser, he twirls around like a ballerina and gently falls onto the table?
Oh my god! I mean, I've seen similar classic Who deaths that are just as over the top and bad. There's famously one of my favorite ones is when it's my favorite Dalek death of all time, where I forget which episode it was, the Sixth Doctor Dalek story, I think.
Yeah, Revelation.
Yeah, Revelation, where Men gets shot by a Dalek, has about 5 to 7 seconds of writhing and spasming, then looks up, reaches a hand out at his friend, and then slowly
collapses.
Falls over.
And that was and as I said to Cuff, that was a deliberate director's decision. I think that was Graham Harper who did that. But either way, the director just told him, yeah, it's like, you're getting electrocuted, so really, make it intense. And that was the result. I find those moments charming myself. I can enjoy them, certainly on an ironic level, but I can certainly understand why anybody else would find them really fucking frustrating. Because
if you told me this episode didn't have a director, I'd believe you.
Oh, God. Oh, actually, the guy who directed this, there was a documentary about him on, I think it's the Visitation DVD. He did The Visitation, he did this, he did The Twin Dilemma, and he did... Oh, he also did a Fourth Doctor story called State of Decay, which basically has space vampires, which I actually would like to check that out at some point, because it's quite interesting. But, yeah, the direction, now that you bring it up, Hadley, it is, I mean, things are happening in the frame, and you can see them, but then it's not particularly interesting, I suppose, so...
There's a lot of performances where you're just like, well, what were they going for?
Yeah,
At least with... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I had nothing to say, you go on.
At least with a character like Oscar, he's a melodramatic, weird little dude, but he's fun, and he's endearing.
He's great. Yeah, I like his character quite a lot.
Yeah.
Which one was Oscar?
He's the waiter.
The actor, who's the waiter.
I mean, it's one of those characters which is like, initially, the second time he appeared, I was like, oh yeah, these guys are a thing. But I very quickly became, like, very endeared to both of them.
Yeah.
I think that his death scene was, like, a bit much.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That bit annoyed me, because the first time I watched it, I thought, oh, actually, yeah, that's actually quite emotive. I feel really sorry for this character. I really like them. But then I was watching it today, and I thought, this moment feels really cheap. It feels like it's just been jammed in there to get a bit of pathos from the audience in order to counteract the rest of the shitty, nasty characterizations that are going on. So, and that honestly, that was one of these sort of, Chibsy sort of moments where I just thought, yeah, I could see Chris Chibnall pulling a stupid stunt like that, just chucking in.
Oscar's death, it's not just a character death; it's a beacon of hope. It's a symbol of love.
Oh Christ!
It's fucking dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I feel more sympathy for his, I forget her name, Anita, is it? Yeah, Anita. I feel more sympathy for her in that moment because like she's losing a close friend. But then I think, did the show establish why they are as close as they are? Like it just like they go hunting together sometimes. That's it. Like it doesn't.
I mean, they work together, but that's.
I mean, it doesn't really like set them up as like why they have such a bond outside of work.
Yeah.
Like the guy likes to collect moths, and Anita's like, Anita doesn't. So why is she joining him?
And there's like a scene of a sickly old lady being attacked by the villains.
Oh yeah.
She's got like a cane. I can't tell if she's just bad at walking or she's blind, because either way, she's using the cane wrong.
I think it's established that she's blind.
Yes,
sure. Yeah, well, she's using it wrong. If
she's using it wrong, yeah. I completely forgot about that character as well. Like, cause
she's only in that scene, I'm pretty sure.
Well, yeah, but like she shows. I remember that scene now because like that scene happens and we see the statue of like the Virgin Mary in the church, and for a minute, I'm like, okay, this episode is poorly written enough that it could make me think they included this and just forgot that they're not on Earth. Like we're just in this like because that's the first time we see Earth in the story. So like, there's no indication that we're going to have a location change. So part of me was like, did they use this as like a location, another location on this planet or spaceship or wherever they are, and just forget that there's no way a different civilization would have Mary as an object of reverence?
It's yeah.
And it doesn't say a lot when the episode is legitimately making you think it's dumber than it is.
Yeah, that's very true. I forgot what I was gonna say. I've got quite a few things written down here. Like, what have I got? Just give me a minute.
There's a scene of the Sixth Doctor where he falls and he just perfectly lands on some wiring.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the impeccable cliffhanger of the first episode.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently Perry just magically changes shoes in between scenes.
Oh, really?
I didn't notice that.
That's...
Also, that reminds me, and I know, I think I've brought this up before with other Sixth Doctor stories. I don't know whether it's just me who notices this, but I find Nicola Bryant's American accent annoying because it is very inconsistent. Now, granted, as I've said before, that may be because I know what her actual voice sounds like because she was in Blackadder's Christmas Carol. But man, like, there just little moments where you can just see it slipping, and it's just... I'm like, I get that this wasn't a Sixth Doctor story decision, it was because I think she showed up I think it was Planet of Fire, which is definitely with the Fifth Doctor. But I'm like, why did they make her American? Like, what was...
Well, this
point?
was I think there was because there was a movement like around the middle of the Fourth Doctor era, around the time Sarah Jane left, where they wanted to make their companions like different than her, and like really justify like a different perspective, right? That's why Leela happened.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
You know, and then Tegan was Australian, and then we have Turlo, I think, who appeared at that time, who was like very different as well. And then Perry rocks up and is American for the reason of, well, if we have her be British, she's basically Sarah Jane again.
Well, like, they're all British now in like New Who, right?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, Captain Jack isn't. He's very clearly American. Apart from that,
isn't there that one guy that's in the first series that goes to the future gets that head implant? Is he?
Yeah,
American?
he's English as well. I mean, he's the only English person at the American establishment that he works at, which is why he gets taken later on. It stands out.
It's like in anime where like only one person in the crowd's got weird hair. It's like, you're the main character. You've got a British accent. Come with me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think you're right. I think every other companion has been like. I think the biggest departure has been Amy is Scottish.
There are a couple of minor characters that are American in the first few seasons. In particular, in the 10th planet, they arrive. I think it's either. I don't think it's Antarctica. I think it's the Arctic Circle, and they're at an American base.
I'm strictly speaking companions, though.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there have been other nationalities popping up every now and then in the show.
Yeah.
Like it's not unheard of to have places not be Britain. And Seville is an interesting landmark for this kind of for the show. Rather, I wish it had been used better than let's check out the local food scene.
Yeah,
it feels like choices are being made, but I just can't figure out why. I'm just not piecing the puzzle together.
It's an episode that pays lip service to stuff that Doctor Who used to do really well, but not understanding why. Which is, again, a thing that Chibnall loves to do in his era.
Yeah, it's doing what a lot of it is being done because, I think, because it is Doctor Who, low to mid-budget BBC show from the 80s. So as I said, I'm convinced somebody just said, we've got to go over to Spain for a bit, we're going to include that in the story, and they're clearly just not integrating it into the story well at all. I have said before that one of the things I do like about Classic Who is that, and this is true of a lot of other sort of low-budget, scrappy underdog art, it has limitations, but those limitations can provoke the creative team to come up with interesting solutions and make the story richer for it. This is clearly an example of that not playing out at all. This is clearly an example of the limitations just crippling, just crushing this story. That combined with, as you've said, very lazy, use of canon. There's nothing interesting or particularly good that's coming out of any of this.
Well, it just felt like this was the era.
Bad.
This is the era of the show where they've gone past the 20th anniversary, and the production team have clearly gone, we're untouchable. We don't have to put as much work into this now. It's Doctor Who. It's a British tradition. People will watch it because it's on. So we can we don't have to put as much effort into making this good anymore. And that is what led to the show being cancelled 4 years after this episode aired.
I know I'm not allowed to bring it up, but that's how I'm feeling about the MCU right now.
I mean, that's fair as well. You can bring up whatever you want. I'm not gonna
I like to bring up tension. That's all. I like to stir the pot.
Fair enough.
No, I can't say that opinion is a new one that's been brought up. It's definitely they got past the end game and they're like, well, people will watch whatever we put out because they don't want to miss a piece of the story for when it becomes relevant. So I get that, but I enjoy those bits regardless.
I'd comment on that more, but I don't watch MCU movies as a general rule.
Probably a good call at this point. Don't get invested just from the start, just in case you get as hooked as me and the sunk cost fallacy becomes a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like Thor: Love and Thunder. That's a whole other thing. But anyway, yeah. There are a couple of things I want to talk about here with the characterization of the Doctor that seem to be a little bit contradictory. Let me just see what I've got written down here. Okay, so I'm just going to read this note out full. If the second Doctor already visited the space station, how can the sixth Doctor think that the activities on the space station are a good thing? Doesn't he remember how he reacted to them last time? Doesn't the second Doctor know about the experiments of Kurtz and Reimer? If so, how can the sixth Doctor forget?
I mean,
it's all timey-wimey, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's not inconsistent with how we've established multiple Doctors interact with themselves in the past.
Yeah, they don't share each other's memories. That just doesn't happen.
I don't know. I assume they would have. I mean,
they should, but they don't.
Yeah, they should, because in the Three Doctors, for example, the best example of a multi-Doctor story we've seen so far, when the first Doctor shows up for the first time, neither the second nor the third Doctor go, oh yeah. Both of them are shocked to see him, and they're both seeing him for the first time, even though one of them is seeing him for the second time.
And in the Five Doctors, they have some of the newer Doctors interact, remember the older companions. That's the closest thing I can think of.
I guess it just seemed...
Well, actually, I think maybe because prior to that point the Doctors don't actually interact with each other, that's the difference I think you might be coming from there. I can look past it just because of the Time Lord of it all, the fact that it's the Time Lords that interfered with the second Doctor to get him there in the first place. I can chalk it up to the Time Lords' involvement, I think. If the Time Lords only noticed what was happening in the timeline of the sixth Doctor and then sent a different Doctor to do it, I think that could get around it. But it's not the cleanest explanation of...
It just seems kind of dumb and annoying. Also, the whole... The fact that they cross each other in the timelines, shouldn't that contradict the laws of time? I know maybe that's a little bit of a nitpick, but that seems to contradict what we know about Doctor Who so far. I'm pretty sure...
certainly they don't make as big a deal out of it as they do the previous times they interact.
Yeah, it just seems, again, a sort of a lazy lack of understanding of canon. Now,
Well, I
there
think
is
also
one...
that might just be because, like, this is the third time multiple Doctors have interacted, so, like, it's less of a thing now.
Maybe.
And, like...
Maybe.
It's not like a proper special either, it's just like an episode that also happens to feature Patrick Troughton.
Yeah.
I just think...
The previous times they've done it when they've paid lip service to the idea of you can't cross your own timeline and there have been no repercussions. I guess now they're just like, well, just do it, I guess.
I just find it annoying because even with the Five Doctors, which was not a particularly good episode, it even then, the explanation as to why all these Doctors were meeting was like there was a definitive reason. It was because somebody was using the time scoop. But here, it just happens, and I'm pretty sure the Doctor even says, "Oh, I'm sure I'm bound to cross paths with myself eventually." It's like, well, really? Are ya? I mean, I'm not sure about that.
That seems pretty weak. Like, time is infinite,
Yeah.
space is infinite. There's not a guarantee.
Yeah, there is one bit that I do want to definitely bring up, though, in that small section, and this is one of the things that really gave me, Chibsian vibes. When
Gypsian.
when Perry is I think saying, yeah, well, maybe the Time Lords did something terrible here. And the Doctor says, and I wrote this down, no, it's unbelievable that they would commit such an atrocity. The use of force is alien to Time Lord nature. And I'm sorry. I get that maybe it's a bit different, but honest to God, that reminds me of why would they lie. And you can't convince me of otherwise.
I could see it in the case of, like, they're not wanting... The Time Lords, like, with their no interfering policy... Like, it's not worded correctly in this episode, if that's what he's going for with that line. But on that regard, sure. And also, like, the second Doctor, depending on where he is in the timeline, might not have experienced, like, that amount of Time Lord, like, bullshittery.
He already kind of did, though, with the Deadly Assassin. It's not like
well, that's
he should be...
That's the fourth Doctor, though, right? We're talking about this... Oh, no, is it Colin Baker?
No,
this,
I'm
right?
talking about the sixth Doctor.
Yeah,
He's the one who said it.
Oh, yeah, in that case, there's no excuse, yeah.
Yeah, like...
It reminds me of a line from the new Saw movie where he's like, Jigsaw never targeted cops before, which is fundamentally not true. Anytime someone is investigating the Jigsaw killings, Jigsaw makes it his personal mission to get really petty with the cops investigating him, often kills all of them. One of the cops turns out to be one of his accomplices, and in two of the movies, they're literally the main character.
Oh, no.
So, come on. What are you on about?
Jesus.
Yeah, it's...
Is the new Saw movie, like, strictly a sequel to all of them, or does it do the Halloween thing where it's like, we're only considering these ones canon?
So basically the first 7 movies are, like, very much one story. Very clearly interconnected. You need to watch all of them to understand it. Jigsaw, you really only need to watch the first 3, because the third one is where Jigsaw dies, which is the most important thing. Spiral, you don't really need to have watched any Saw movie, because it's just, like, set in a different city, with different characters, and it's like a copycat killer, and they're like, oh, this is just like the Jigsaw killings from San Francisco, wherever it's actually set. I don't know what they're doing with 10, which comes out this year. The quote I said was from Spiral with the Chris Rock movie.
Sure.
The new one doesn't have a trailer yet. We really don't know anything aside from Jigsaw and his first accomplice Amanda are coming back. They've been dead since the 3rd movie.
Okay.
I'm terrified and also very excited to see what they do.
That's the best.
Dear.
That's the best mood for pre-film release.
Yes.
Yeah. Excitement and terror. Yeah, so that line annoyed me. That was a very Chibnall era line, in my view. Maybe not quite as bad as Why Would They Lie, and not least of all because there was more history between Two Doctors and Timeless Child. But it was still annoying, and then he doubles down on it and he says, no, I won't believe it. It's like, what are you talking about, Doctor? And not to mention the fact that this is a Doctor who, I mean, granted this episode happened later, but in one of the biggest sort of character arcs that he goes through in the Trial of a Time Lord is he really realizes how unbelievably corrupt Time Lord, certainly the upper echelons of Time Lord society, are. So it's just annoying that we see this sort of naive, dumb attitude. I mean, it's slightly contradicted, like a bit earlier on when the Doctor, is, unofficially, interfering when that's not the Time Lord's official policy, but it's
Yeah.
not nearly enough to mitigate the ridiculous elements of the Sixth Doctor's lines on the matter. It's just
Well,
really
There's also,
really
like,
annoying.
Isn't there also like the Second Doctor and his like proclivity to just be like, I'm a Time Lord, when like he was never that proud of his heritage in his own era? I mean, primarily because they didn't establish the name Time Lord until right at the end of his. But like, even still, he was never like the Second Doctor was never the kind of person to proudly go, this is who I am, and I'm from like all nationalism all the way. I'm from this species, and I'm proud to be called such a thing.
Well, the thing is, I would want to say that was just him sort of leveraging some sort of authority over Dastari in that moment, but at the same time, the tone and the tenor of his rhetoric in those scenes, he seems to be weirdly satisfied and proud of the fact that Time Lords decide, it's great, don't worry guys, and not corrupt at all. Sure. So God, that whole scenario was annoying, and again, Chibnall vibes just being beamed into my head. I think I may be done.
I think we are too.
I want to talk about the last line in this special. Do you guys remember what it was?
I don't.
There is actually another thing I want to talk about, but I will. But we can do this. Yes, I do remember what the last line is.
Like I
We're
said
going
before,
to be on a strictly vegetarian diet.
Vegetarian diet for the both of us.
Oh my god, that's right. Oh, I can't believe I forgot about that.
And then it just unceremoniously ends.
Jesus Christ.
As the Doctor says, no more Gumbletracks. God.
I mean, that's certainly like... Good God.
What did you have left to say, Fitz? Because I feel like the final line speaks for itself, honestly.
It's really like a bizarre attempt to give the Doctor a catchphrase long before the show started to do that genuinely.
I didn't do it.
Can we talk about how the Sixth Doctor becomes a murderous psychopath? Sorry, is a murderous psychopath?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it, and it's not unique to this story.
And I think I've even heard that it's even worse than like Vengeance on Varos. It'll be interesting to take a look at that. But it was just, and look.
But the solution to his plan becomes like, I'm going to lie and trick someone into violently dying in this horrible, gruesome way, and then I'm also going to kill a bunch of other people over the course of the story.
He also wants to eat a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Jeez. He also, like, very briefly gets a hard-on for a dog as well.
His characterization is just so dumb and unpleasant, and again, like, when he kills Shockeye, it in some way makes sense, but it's basically a contradiction of everything the Doctor, stood for up to that point. Well, maybe not quite up to that point, but through most of Doctor Who's history. And I think I said that, because I mentioned this scene before, I think he says something to the effect of, oh, well, you did deserve it. And he doesn't say exactly that, but he may as well have, because he just goes, just desserts.
Yeah.
Not only is that lame...
You deserve this because of who you were genetically born to be.
You desert this.
Oh, God.
Not only is that line lame, but the whole thing is just, again, needlessly unpleasant and succumbing to the nastiest sort of cynical 80s impulses. Like literal fucking cyanide, guys. Like, really? What?
Well, it's also a very 80s
Who thought that was a good idea?
It's also a very 80s thing to do, to give the kill line, like the witty thing
to say. The one-liner,
yeah, the witty thing to say when you've just killed someone. That's not the Doctor.
And then he goes and says, euphemizes it by saying, oh, he got mothballed. Like, oh, God.
If you're done with your notes, Fitz, I think the sooner we can stop talking about this episode forever, the better we'll all be for it. Who would like to give their first score?
So if I was counting this objectively, if I looked at this, I'd be giving it a 1. But because of just how strange it was and how utterly wonderful Patrick Troughton was as an Androgam, I gotta give it a 6.
Wow.
Wow. Woo.
I hate what that's gonna do to this episode's average. Because I'm sticking firm on a 2. I think it's fun to see, like, the past characters interact with the new ones. I think, in particular, like, none of the Doctor stuff, but I think it's interesting watching Jamie and the new Doctor and him sort of learning all this lore that he never got a chance to learn on his time on the show. The Jamie stuff is quite good, especially, like, I like the reveal of him being, like you know, in shambles and complete disarray. Like, it further paints a good image of what the hell happened here. But, like, there's nothing good else besides that. It's cynical, it's lazy writing, it's poor production quality, it's horrifically characterized, and it's doesn't give a compelling reason for its main premise to exist. So, 2 out of 10.
Yeah, I think there were small elements I enjoyed in this story. Again, I actually quite like the side characters, and even the villains I found quite compelling. Like, even Shockeye and Cassini, their back and forth was pretty good. Dastari was an interesting enough character, I suppose. Really loved, Oscar and Anita quite endearingly. But yeah, borderline completely pointless story. What I saw, some contradictions to canon, really fucking frustrating characterizations of both Doctors that made them ignorant and unpleasant and nasty and needlessly cruel. It was fun watching Pat Troughton as an Androgam. Still completely fucking pointless to the whole story. And even though this story didn't make me as viscerally angry as something like Attack of the Cybermen did, that might just be because my expectations of what a Sixth Doctor story is are now so low that this was not as much of a shock to the system as it could have been. So, yeah, I agree, Cuff. I'm also going to give it a 2. Tiny little bits that I enjoy, nowhere near enough to justify it. And God love Pat Troughton. Again, I know I've said this a number of times with actors, and even this is true of Colin Baker as well. They're trying their best with what they've been given, and they've been given is garbage.
Right, I'm glad we've sorted that out.
Yeah.
So Hadley, your streak of appearances on this podcast is over for a bit. Once again,
I'll be back soon.
Yep, fairly soon. But we will have a few weeks of just 2 Who's once again. We're getting back to our show title not being incorrect for about a month or so. One last time before then, what would you like to plug?
So I'm on Stale Bread. We release monthly videos where we talk about 2 Goosebumps books a month and their respective TV adaptations. I like to think the style's basically just Red Letter Media's best of the worst. Yeah. We're just kind of ranting about stuff, and then it'll cut in between us reacting to something stupid on the show. I think it adds a lot of personality, us recording our reactions to the episodes itself.
Yeah,
so
they're
that's
fun.
Definitely something to watch out for. And that takes forever to edit, so please watch. Tell me how great it is. Stroke my ego. I definitely need it. Thank you.
Until we have you back, like I said, it's just me and Fitz for a while. Next week, we're going to be looking at the first part of the 2-part finale to Series 2. We're looking at the episode Army of Ghosts. The first episode of the final Rose story, and we can finally get some good companions in the mix. Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
I'm Hadley.
And Gumblejack.
We're all vegetarians now.